Quick notes for the council. There will be elections soon. The nomination period closed. I'm fairly certain that those of us running for council leadership are running unopposed, but your participation in elections would be greatly appreciated just for the process and following the process. Also, Amanda mentioned the Connect community. Two issues that I think I started to go in and post within the Telework Council and I didn't, so this is my reminder to do that. There are 7 states that are potentially facing a double taxation issue come 2021 tax season: Arkansas, Connecticut, Delaware, Massachusetts, Nebraska, New York, and Pennsylvania, where if employees work in one state, live in another, may be paying double income tax on their remote work that they've had to do over the last many months. So there is an appetite within ACT to kind of do some broader education and coordinate with the Public Policy Committee to figure out what steps, if any, ACT may take on this issue. And then there's also interest from Representative Curtis in Utah to draft a bill supporting an increased support for telework. And so I'll put some of the details in the Connect community. And if you have thoughts or want to join in on those conversations, please do. And with that, we will jump right into part 2 of our webinar series. So we have 2 presenters today. I'm going to introduce both Nick and Coire now, and then they'll just kind of jump from one to the next so that you don't have to hear my voice or look at me again. Nick has been with Commute Seattle for almost 3 years and supports a variety of small business programs. He specializes in community outreach and program development and helps customers start commuter benefits programs from the ground up. However, in the year of COVID, his work has pivoted to focus more on the remote work experience for employees, hosting a series of employer roundtables, webinars, and he helped develop a workplace experience during COVID survey, which is the reason you're here today, and you'll get to hear more on that. And also Reilly with 501 Contra Costa. For over 15 years, he's been working in the San Francisco Bay Area in the fields of affordable housing, nonprofit development, public health, and urban planning. And for the last 3 years, he's been the TDM program manager for 511 Contra Costa. He's a founding member of Groundwork Richmond, an urban forestry and youth development nonprofit, and serves as a Parks and Recreation Commissioner for the city of Oakland, where he lives. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. Perfect. And
I will start sharing.
Nick, we will turn it over to you.
Great.
Perfect.
Thank you, Allie. Okay, is everyone able to see my screen right now?
Yes.
Okay, are you guys seeing the full screen? Or the
It's showing us the
presenter?
next slide.
Yeah, okay.
Presenter view.
Yeah.
Do you have 2 screens? There you go.
I do. How's that? Okay, great.
Yeah.
So as Allie mentioned, I'll be sharing the results from our workplace experience during COVID survey, which was conducted in the middle of May. A hope of ours is to resurvey the participants at the end of this year, beginning of next year, to see sort of where their behaviors have shifted, how their plans have shifted. But really the intention of this survey was just to get a baseline understanding of how the businesses that we work with throughout the city of Seattle were responding to the stay-at-home, work remote setting. We did at that time have a mandate for only essential businesses to be commuting into the office. So we had 415 respondents. 134 were from our Commute Trip Reduction program, which are businesses with 100 or more employees, or TMPs, which are buildings with a transportation management plan. 281 were from small business clients, or ORCA, which is our regional transit pass, which we help employers offer to their employees. So we had a really, really diverse base of respondents, which was excellent because we didn't just want tech or law or architecture, some of the really major industries in downtown Seattle that could have a much easier time making the pivot to the fully remote setting. So we had 20 different industries. It was very diverse. We also were really pleasantly surprised to find that right around 60% of respondents were from what we define as small businesses, so 100 employees or less, with 35% of those respondents coming in the 1 to 20 sized number of employees sized business. So it wasn't just the Amazons, the Microsofts, the Google, it really was the mom and pop shops, the restaurants, the small retailers, the startup companies that were also participating in the survey, which allowed us to understand how companies and businesses that don't have employee transportation coordinators, don't have robust commuter benefit programs or policies around telework, were making this emergency pivot. So right around 75% of our respondents said that they were able to retain most of their staff at this time. Again, this was all done early in the COVID experience, so some of that has probably changed. Interestingly enough, right around 37% said that they had to furlough a certain number of employees or let a certain number go, which sort of overlaps with that 76%. Probably could have been a little more clear on the language about retain most of our staff, but pretty overwhelmingly, it seemed like the businesses were being patient in the early stages of COVID and not reacting really strongly and letting people go without fully understanding. So 3/4 of workplaces that were able to make the remote pivot said that the vast majority, 80 to 100% of their staff, was working fully remote. So some companies said that they still had people going in to collect mail, that they were checking on the office, that they had to go in to maybe send certain things out. But the vast majority of people were able to make the complete pivot, which was pretty exciting for us. And this is probably the most telling slide from the entire survey. So we asked before and after COVID, what were the telework, remote work policies that companies had? 27% said that before COVID, they had never worked remotely, which is a pretty significant number, seeing as 80% of people were working fully remote. Another 27 said that they would work remotely a few times a month. There was only 1% said that they were working remotely every day. So as you can see, like we definitely had people that were teleworking infrequently, but it wasn't a huge part of the commuting equation. And after COVID, we had 41% that said that they were anticipating working fully remote. And again, after COVID, we're still in COVID. So we understand that number is still probably quite a bit higher than 41%. In fact, there's a national survey that came out that Seattle ranked 4th overall in metro areas around the country, with just under 50% of employees reporting working remote. So that number is still higher than 41. But the anticipation was that even as we continue to reopen in Seattle, businesses that are working remote are going to continue working remote pretty frequently. And what was really significant is that, and how we use this data to sort of curate the resources that we were creating for our customers during and continuing during COVID, was that 22% were unsure what they were going to do. And that really told us that a lot of businesses were just sort of flying by the seat of their pants. They didn't have a plan. They didn't have experience with telework. They were just sort of taking it day by day, hoping to get a better understanding of what the requirements were based on the state or the city and what was going to be safe for their employees. So that really showed us that there's an avenue to sort of hone in and focus on the telework experience and how it can continue to be a resource throughout COVID, but also can be an element to a commuter benefit program going forward, not just in cases of global pandemics, but as something that people can utilize frequently. So we asked, from the perspective of the respondent, how is remote work going from your workplace? And pretty overwhelmingly, it was positive. 80% said well or very well, and another 17% said fair. Very few people said that it was going poorly or very poorly, which really told us that maybe, although it might not be everyone's favorite working environment or work experience, people were still able to get their work done at the end of the day. So that was an exciting development for us, and really showed us that, this is something that maybe if we make this experience more positive, or something that people can get excited about or just feel more comfortable in, that number could allow us to continue to be a very telework heavy city during this pandemic. So we asked people what the 3 largest challenges in workplace were while working fully remote. The biggest one is just not all roles in workplaces can be done remotely. What that really told us is that even with offices that have made the fully remote pivot, there are still employees that are not able to do their work. That's a lot of administrative staff, front of the house, things like that. And so one thing that we do have to be really cognizant of as we continue to push telework as a long-term solution, or telework as something that we should be doing until we have a vaccine, until it is safe to return to the office in a multimodal fashion, that we might be eliminating positions and contributing to the unemployment rates. So that is something that we are very cognizant of, that it's not something everyone can do completely, and just be mindful of that. The second highest one was difficulty communicating with coworkers. We've hosted a variety of roundtables and webinars throughout this experience, and a lot of those have focused on how to improve the community, the online community, the telework community. What are the various different options for communication with your staff, whether it's instant messaging, whether it's email, whether it's video calls, how can you do phone calls through things like Microsoft Teams so that you're not using your cell phone for business calls. I'm from Oregon, I have an Oregon cell phone, so a lot of times I'll be calling people and it'll go straight to voicemail, and I'll have to leave a voicemail and explain who I am, because they're like, why is this person from Oregon calling me? I'm expecting someone from Commute Seattle. So there are a lot of technological advances and resources that have, I think, really improved the experience as we've helped companies determine what the best options are for their teams. Employees facing too many distractions was another really big one, especially, and I don't know where all of our attendees are from today, in Seattle, school is fully remote. So we recently hosted a webinar that is posted on our YouTube channel about how employers can support their teleworking employees or their non-teleworking employees during this period of time where their kids are going back to school remote. So not only are they working in a global pandemic remote at home, they're also doubling as school teachers. And that's a really challenging experience, and just being mindful and present to support them through that experience, and have a very flexible policy around how the work is done, what work hours look like, etc., is really something that we encourage employers to be doing during this time. So we asked the employers that were working remote if they had a official remote work policy or what that might look like. The majority of respondents said that they do not have a formal written policy, or they have an informal policy that is not written. So 76% said that they are just kind of doing it right now. So really focusing in on what, it's not just like, hey, we're able to telework, let's put that in writing, but what is expected of employees during this telework period. Going forward, when we are able to return to the office, what is that policy going to look like? How do you stay in communication with your team members? How do you stay accountable to your workload, to your managers? How frequently are you doing one-on-ones? The sort of basic bare bones of what a telework policy should look like. So we supported a lot of businesses in sort of developing something that's a little bit more robust, and in those conversations, it allowed us to have this conversation about how are you going to do this long term. So of the 415 respondents, 10% said that a portion of their employees are not able to work remote. A lot of these were some of the industries that you might expect, so essential workers, or it was retail, it was food service, it was hospitality. We asked them what their expectations were, or what their current operations were, and the majority of them had very limited or completely shut down operations. Only 22% said that their operations were the same as before, and a lot of those were essential workers. Then we asked, when the stay-at-home order is lifted, what is your workplace planning from an operations standpoint? 38% said that they would go back fully operational. 33% said limited operations, and the others were sort of in this area of like, we are totally unsure what this is going to look like, or if we're even going to be a business? I'm really interested on this slide what the responses would be now. Seattle is still somewhat at a stay-at-home order. I mean, we're open, our restaurants are open, people can dine in, but that environment is so different now. The capacity is so different now. I'd be curious what those responses would look like. We asked, as a result of COVID, which of the following changes is your workplace considering related to commuter benefits? And overwhelmingly, the number one thing was permitting employees to work remotely more frequently. Pretty obviously, that is going to be a huge part of this equation. We're also really seeing, based on feedback we're receiving from our customers, that companies are learning to really enjoy the work remote experience. People have more time in their day when they're not commuting. They spend more time with their families. They're able to do more things around the house. So that, that's really a quality of life benefit that I think a lot of people didn't really consider before they had this opportunity. So incorporating that more frequently. As some companies have considered returning to the office, there's really been a focus on staggering their work schedules so that half the office comes in one week, half the office comes in another week, or people arrive at different times. Exciting for us, we did not see many companies that said that they were going to be reducing their transit subsidies. King County Metro, who is our regional transit provider and who manages a lot of the Orca business programs, has been really flexible about delaying payments, providing people credits when we went fare free. We did go fare free from, I want to say, like March or April all the way through till September 1st. So businesses have been credited for their annual programs, and the cost of those annual programs has been significantly reduced because it's based on ridership in the last 6 months. So they're really doing everything they can to keep businesses involved in these business programs. So we haven't seen an overwhelming drop off. That being said, within all of King County, I think a little over 100 companies have ended their formal Orca programs. And finally, we asked businesses, or the respondents, which of the following topics they would appreciate the most information and resources on. A lot of it was transit related. We were a city that had a really great mode split commuting into downtown, right around 40-ish%, a little over 40% of people were taking transit. We had about a 25% single occupancy vehicle. Currently, our transit ridership is still at about 25% of what it was before, but we're seeing about the same rates of traffic coming into downtown. So that's telling us that while not everyone is returning to the office yet, in fact, about 50% are, those that are returning are opting to drive alone. So if we continue to open and reopen and have people coming in at this rate of driving alone, we're going to have pretty catastrophic traffic. So increasing transit capacity is going to be important, and also increasing people's awareness of safe riding habits. So we've done a series of webinars that involve King County Metro and sharing about what they're doing to ensure safety and what they're expecting from riders. We're also going through significant service cuts, so informing the public that roughly 50 routes coming in and through Seattle have been cut or are going to be cut, and people are going to have to adapt to how they're going to be commuting into downtown because the routes they take may not exist anymore. We also, on top of all this, the West Seattle Bridge has been closed for about 6 months. It experienced significant cracking that was not anticipated. So that is the most highly used bridge in Seattle, had roughly 100,000 drivers and 25,000 transit riders every single day. It's the main option into downtown and main Seattle from West Seattle, which is sort of a little peninsula area. So it's created pretty significant traffic constraints for about 80,000 residents in that peninsula. So we've been providing a lot of guidance around what are the options there, what's the desired mode split for people coming into that area. Spoiler alert, it's very optimistic around people that are going to be continuing public transportation and people that are going to be biking or walking into downtown. But there's a very, very heavy focus on telework for West Seattle employees, just because we don't have great options for getting into downtown and we have a lot of constraints. And those constraints are amplified by the fact that we have limited numbers of riders that can use public transportation due to social distancing. And what was really exciting is that we had 41% and 35% that said they were interested in creating a return to work plan, and remote work is the new norm. So that really let us know that respondents were aware that this is going to take longer than expected, that it's going to be a slow return to our old normal, and they want support in creating materials and supporting their employees with this fully remote setting. So that is all for me. I'm happy to answer any questions now, or I don't know if we want to just go to the other presentation.
I think we can do questions now, mainly because I am kind of curious. I found the data on the respondents of your survey so interesting with this, so many small employers reporting, but I was curious if you took your data and looked at it, the responses just from those smaller employers versus the responses from the larger employers, and was there a lot of differences?
Yeah, we did. There were obviously there were a lot of small businesses that were sort of more retail centric, food service, hospitality, that weren't really aligned with a lot of our major employers. Most of the ones, the ones in the 10,000 range, those are tech companies, and they've completely pivoted to fully remote. So most of the folks that said that they were not able to pivot to a remote setting were small businesses, unfortunately.
Yeah. I just hadn't seen data that way, and I feel like the results of your survey are very different than what I was expecting. So I found that all very interesting.
Yeah, I think we were even a little bit surprised by how optimistic some of the respondents were about it, and how many were able to make a pivot in some capacity. I think it might look a little bit different now, because this was in a period of time where people were sort of hanging in there, and now we're 6 months into it. So we might see that the number of people that have been laid off or furloughed has increased. I would not be surprised based on some of the comments that we've received. We did have some qualitative questions included that we don't incorporate into this presentation because they're long-winded. There was a lot of qualitative ones from small businesses that were surviving off of some of the federal government loans and just sort of like biding their time, hoping that something would change soon. So I think that we would find that a small portion of the respondents now may no longer be in business.
Got it. I don't know if anyone else had a question. I feel like it's a small enough group. We can be open in chat.
I just wanted to make a comment. I really did think it was interesting in terms of the percentage of companies who had not teleworked at all prior to the pandemic, which was, I think, around 27%. And that's pretty, was it 27?
27, yeah.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I thought that was pretty significant as well, particularly for your region. And so it was interesting, that was interesting to me, but pretty consistent, I think, with some of the other surveys that I've seen in other regions in terms of those folks that have been teleworking in some capacity. So
yeah, and Seattle actually has had a decent telework mode split. I want to say it was right around 6 or 7%.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have to keep in mind that this is just one company representative that was taking the survey, so it's possible that they may not have ever worked remotely, but they had other employees that were fully remote. So in the future, in a second survey, we might want to say, I guess we do ask what the organization's remote work culture is, but it definitely was higher in the never worked remotely. But then you'll see it's also 27% for the few times a month. And this was really interesting to us because it demonstrated that there was a culture of adaptability, and that businesses were really willing to lean into this. Like I think we're seeing kind of around the country a lot that business owners and companies and some local government is a little bit more combative and opposed to making this adaptation until we have a vaccine or a form of treatment that's more easily accessible. But within Seattle, I would just really say that I believe the culture has been pretty overwhelmingly supportive and understanding, and resilient is really the word that we're using.
Great information.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nick.
Yeah, I will stop sharing and hand it over.
Is it me?
It's you.
Okay, all right. Hi, everyone. I'm Coire Reilly. I work in Contra Costa County in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I hope I can use my tabs here. Sorry, the Zoom controls are kind of getting in my way here. So speaking of qualitative data, we took an approach that was much more qualitative. Our big motivator for this is that we have a big commuter incentive program, and so we wanted to create an incentive program that would make all of these, work from all these employees and employers that are doing work from home now. We wanted to make that permanent post-COVID. So we wanted to create an incentive program to make that stuff permanent. So that was the lens that we were doing, that we were looking at when we were going through this process and working on our own surveys and all that. And so our survey that we developed was really, we sent it out large and wide. We sent it out on email blasts. We contacted, our employers, but also we have a fairly large newsletter subscription base. We also worked through our various city and county contacts and all that. So there was a big mix of who responded to this. And basically, we were seeing this as this, grand experiment that was non-voluntary. And so we wanted to see if there was a way that we could see what people liked, see what the challenges were, and then create an incentive program to hopefully embed working from home into the culture of the Bay Area. So we do have a lot of incentive programs right now. You can see on the screen our e-bike rebate program. We also have, lots of, transit incentives and guaranteed ride home and all that stuff. But we had never had a program that was incentivizing working from home before. So that's what we tried to set out to do. And that is at the end of that. Sorry. So we did our survey. We did a smaller survey in April that was just a couple of questions to kind of test a little bit of the waters about how the working from home experience was going for people. But then we did a more comprehensive one in June 2020, and this was really led up by my colleagues, Kirsten and Lori, so just to give them props on that. Some of our results, we got 411 responses from people in our county. About 27% of them were managers, and the rest were non-managers. We had about 64% that were responding that were working in the private sector versus 36 that were working in the public sector. We asked a similar question about whether they worked from home prior to COVID, and about a third. 1/3 had on a regular basis, 1/3 had occasionally, and 1/3 had never worked from home before. We asked, if there were children at home, and a little under half had children at home. And then this is where we were really trying to get in, is so how is this going? So we're all kind of thrown into this situation. How is this actually going with people? And what we found was that overwhelmingly, people were very satisfied with the work from home experience, and that really carried over to both the managers and the non-managers. The managers had a little bit lower of a response rate on that, showing a little bit more less overwhelmingly satisfied than non-managers, but still overall, managers and non-managers alike were very satisfied with their work from home experience. We asked about what the different benefits were, and there were lots of different options for people to choose. And not surprisingly, the top 2 benefits that people were really happy about from working from home was not wasting all that time commuting, and saving money by not commuting. And we know that that's obviously going to be the biggest thing. I mean, commutes are just, bad for your health, they're bad for your family, they're bad for your hobbies, they're bad for all sorts of things, including, the environment. And then we asked for top 2 challenges, and one of the answers that came out on top was that working from home is not a challenge. So people weren't really talking a lot about what their challenges were so much. The biggest one, though, that did make the chart was that social isolation was, a challenge. And then we asked about different things that would improve their situation. So again, we were looking at it from the incentive program. And early on, when we were trying to figure out how we were going to incentivize people to continue to work from home, we were considering all sorts of different things, such as giving people a shopping cart to be able to buy various office supplies, or reimbursing for various things that would make their work from home easier, or even giving companies funding to help them, say get proper Ethernet cables and get people set up to work from home and all that stuff. That's ended up what we didn't land on for a various number of reasons, but there were a couple of things that people said that people would need to be able to work comfortably from home. And the biggest one is like most people don't have an ergonomic office set up at their work, so they would need a better office chair, a better desk. I know within the first week of COVID, I saw that this was going to be lasting a while, and I grabbed my double monitors, my desk, and my office chair. But not everyone has that ability. And then this was where we were also really interested in seeing if both managers and employees thought that the productivity was the same. And overwhelmingly, people thought productivity was the same. People thought the quality was still very good of the work. And then managers said that there were similar or even more productive in their roles. And then we wanted to get a gauge on what people thought about returning to their work site. And so what we found was that managers were more in favor of returning to the work site, whereas non-managers were more like ambivalent or nervous or not really like looking forward to returning to the work site. Which, I mean, I don't know, I think it's fairly self-explanatory given like managers' roles and wanting to make sure that people are working on things. So we absorbed a lot of those fears and all that, and I'll show you how we responded to that here in a little bit. And then there was a question about whether you wanted to keep working from home, and 97% of respondents said that yes, they wanted to continue to work from home, at least some, after the COVID restrictions were lifted. So we felt that there was a pretty big demand in trying to make this a permanent program. And then this is the contact information for my colleagues who really did a lot of work on gathering the data there. And so then I'm just going to show you, how we responded to this. So as I said, we have various incentive programs. You can get free transit passes and all that stuff. We created and we had an employer drop down before, but then we created a whole work from home program. And so on our website here, you can see all of our different questions and some various information that we have on working from home to try to promote this as sort of a new permanent reality. We looked and created various documents that people can feel free to look at and use in their own communities. We would just ask maybe you just sort of say that you got some of the information from us or something like that. But really, we're just trying to put it out there because I think working from home is beneficial in a lot of different ways. So we created a frequently asked questions for employees. We created a frequently asked questions that's geared toward employers. And then we created this document that's 9 myths about working from home. It's less productive, or people can make their own schedules, or working from home is unfair to people who still have to go in. So we just tried to create different things to respond to some of the data that we saw and respond to some of those fears and hesitations that we saw from the survey results. And then in order to create this into a permanent program, we gave people various guidelines for work from home programs. So we did a lot of research on what were some of the best practices, what were some of the existing policies and program guidelines that were out there for companies that did have work from home programs. And so we created this program guidelines for how you can go about setting it up. And then we also framed this in a way that is that can be a policy document that can get adopted, by an HR or get adopted by, your city council if you're a public employee or whatever. So we created this in a way that hopefully this could be a document that could be adapted to someone's specific work site and then hopefully get adopted permanently. We also created a sample work from home agreement. If employers wanted to ensure various levels of accountability when they're doing work from home, this is just an agreement that spells out kind of what the expectations are for the employer and the employee, as well as for the company and the company's responsibility back to the employee. And all those can obviously be changed and edited. And so we're sort of on a holding pattern with this right now. We created this suite of information and things like that, and then put that back out into the community. But our idea is, and so what we proposed to our funder that we haven't heard back yet from, is that we do want to be able to provide incentives for companies that formally adopt work from home or substantially update their work from home policies as a result of COVID. And so what we've landed on is that imagining a world where people will still have offices, to go back to, and there will be sort of a return to normalcy. What we ended up saying was we would be able to provide like a monthly lunch or a breakfast or something like that for monthly in-person meetings, thinking that most employer sites wouldn't have people working remotely all the time right at first, and so this would be a way that we would be able to provide, for potentially up to a year, something that people can come back and gather, and that would be some sort of fun incentive that we would be able to allow for people. We're still open to ideas about what the various incentive programs would be, but that kind of became what was one of the best ones and the easiest ones to implement. And then I will just add too that, I don't know, this was big news around here, but our Metropolitan Planning Organization, MTC, when they were putting together the latest draft of their 4-year regional plan, staff added, what if we made it to where 60% of people at large employers had to work from home permanently moving forward in the future? It's not made a big splash and people were like, whoa, can they do that? And like, how would that work? And the answers to that is, well, no, right now they can't mandate that. And how would that work? No one's really sure right now. But right now it's just an idea as something that the regional NPO here might be trying to mandate or might be looking to the state to get authority to mandate. So, if that did happen, obviously there would be, and going back to that question about, what are the various like home setups, do you have distractions at home, do you have a good work from home, like all those, issues will come up. But this could potentially be, a big, game changer, at least here in the Bay Area for, congestion and carbon reduction emission goals. That is the end of my presentation. So I will stop sharing.
I have a quick question. Oh, do you mind if I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So this is Veronica Jarvis, and I saw your on one of your screens about the to save the air telecommute today because we have bad air quality. And I just wondered if you have any way of tracking if people do that. And if there's any way, because it seems like such a great idea. And I think we would love to do something similar. And maybe it wouldn't matter as much when, like, the only times we have really terrible air up where I live near Seattle is for smoke. But otherwise our air quality remains pretty good. But I just wondered how you would know if people are actually doing that, because it would be great. It's a great tool to see if they are responding to environmental concerns. I'm feeling I'm thinking more behaviorally, like, yes, that's great that they're responding to climate change type things with their actions. So that's more what I'm thinking of.
Right. So we did recently redo our website during COVID, so make it like more mobile friendly and get a couple more, be able to have a different pull from different APIs and things like that. So this banner is automatically updated with data that we get from our air district. So when there is a spare the air that's notified by our air district, it pops this up here, and then you can click through, get more information, and then this automatically populates also with data from our air district. But it's sort of like still on our website and still under our brand and all that stuff. We could probably get the click-through data, like see who's visiting this stuff. And then Spare the Air does also have various like pledges to sign up and say that, you know, you're going to do something different for Spare the Air. But other than that, I don't know if we're able to actually like track how many people like see that notification and actually change it. But the Air District and Spare the Air, which is run by the Air District, they do try to get people to pledge and try to track that. So we don't do it directly, but we probably could, you know, get some of that data, you know, pretty, you know, secondhand.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I was just curious if you had any way of doing that, but I think that's a great tool, and I think it's important to make the connection for people that, you know, what they're doing does contribute to the bigger world.
Right.
Oh, I hope it's okay. Somebody asked, Claire asked if we were able to send out the documents. So I found the link on your website and put that in the chat. And you guys,
yeah, and we have
lots of
PDF
good stuff to look at.
Yeah, and we have PDF up there, but I can get the, you know, doc versions, the Windows Word versions, so that they're more easily editable too.
Cool.
Have those hosted.
And Nick, I found the survey results on your website that look like a lot of the visuals from your slides.
Yeah, I can also send out the PowerPoint if that would be helpful.
Cool. That would be great. I'll put that link in here for you as well, Claire. I don't know if anyone besides Robin and myself were also on the session 2 weeks ago, but I found a lot of the data from the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments and the Contra Costa stuff kind of similar, which I found interesting. Like self-isolation came up as popular challenges on both. And I think the idea of like equipment or like furniture was kind of popular on both. So I found that kind of interesting.
Yeah, I'm
Elaine,
glad.
did you have any questions?
I'm sorry, I was just going to add too that I was glad that you kind of captured the, you know, how many folks were teleworking with children, you know, because that just seems to really continue to be a challenge for a lot of folks that are working remotely now. And, you know, with all of the decisions of trying to determine about schools reopening and everything. So that was interesting that you captured how many was like 50% or something like that. Yeah.
I actually wish more surveys, a lot of surveys ask specifically, you know, like, how do you feel about telework, blah, blah, blah. And then, but they forget to ask, like, would this be how you'd telework in the future? Because when I have my kids home, that is not ideal for me.
Right.
And it really changes my opinion on what my current experience of telework. So it's tough to sort of get at those questions, I think, but it does help if people include some sort of like demographics, like, do you have your kids at home, or are you caring, not kids, you know, maybe elderly folks that you're caring for? Are you responsible for other humans right now? But yeah, it really changes your current experience. I used to telework before this and it was lovely, and I miss those days.
Yes.
Well, you know, you bring up a really good point, because for those folks who never teleworked prior to the pandemic, you know, I tell people all the time, because this is not really your normal telework, a lot of people do have misconceptions really about what real telework actually would consist of without all of the pandemic related distractions. So
absolutely. It used to be like my focus time when I could like sit for hours and actually like read things and write things and not have any distractions, and it was like pure quiet. And now, I mean, even just having, like, if you don't have kids, anything like that, if you have somebody else working in the home with you, like having my husband around, a lot of times we have conflicting phone calls, or when I'm trying to work on something, I'll put on my headphones because he's on a phone call, and you know, he's not the worst. He's actually a great coworker, but at the same time, like, it's just we don't have space for both of us, and that's another item that adds to the current state of telework as opposed to the ideal, which I think set up in the future.
Hey, I was just reminded. Oh, I wanted to follow up a little bit with Nick. I'm Elaine. I'm in Boulder. I work with Boulder Transportation Connections. We just did our first webinar yesterday focused on the safety of transit. And it was great. We did a in-session poll about, you know, how safe do you feel using transit? People were kind of skittish. And 50% afterwards said they were feeling better. And it sounded like you've done some of that already. Have you seen any uptick in transit usage after that? Or did you also get some, oh, I feel better about transit now that there's good research coming out, it seems?
Yeah, great question. So I think it's important to acknowledge that we went fare free for a very long time. And on top of that, also branded transit as for essential riders only. So, and our capacity was at about 12 to 18 people per bus, which is you know, Metro will tell you that is like 20% capacity, but for anyone who's ridden one of our rapid ride buses during peak commuting times, it's like 10% capacity. So even though we want people to become more comfortable with transit ridership, we actually have really not been encouraging people to return yet. And part of that's because our transit providers don't have the capacity or the buses for if everyone wants to return at the same time. So we're slowly ramping up, encouraging. I think that rider restrictions may begin to increase potentially, although there's so much energy right now around a second wave of corona that I think we're sort of holding off on that. Additionally, what our team has really been thinking about as we talk about transit ridership with individuals is that everyone's threshold for safety is so different. There are people that are still riding transit for personal reasons and feel totally comfortable and safe doing that. There's people that have been doing it for work purposes. And then there are people that may never ride transit again. And there are people that, like within our team, who have just said, I'm probably not going to get on a bus until there's a vaccine. So what we do is we really focus on what the agencies are doing to make the ridership experience safe and comfortable. There are some pseudo studies out there that some people really reference in saying that transit is no more of a super spreader than going to like the grocery store, things like that. We don't really rely on those things. We rely far more on what transit agencies are doing, what individual riders should be doing. And Metro's slogan is ready when you are. So we're really meeting people where they are in their own threshold of safety. So that's kind of a roundabout answer. We didn't ask if people felt more comfortable after our informational ones, but I think that's because we really didn't want everyone to say, hey, I feel good about this. Let's hop on a bus.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't think everybody's going to rush back yet.
Yeah.
But, you know, our agency is just dealing with such a drop in ridership and so much of a budget shortfall when we're in, you know, we haven't ramped up like Seattle has, but a lot has been happening in our region.
Yeah, I think that it's a interesting balancing act for transit agencies about wanting people to come back because revenue is down so much. Metro has they've made pretty significant service cuts as well, so we've really been focusing on, hey, these are the routes that are gone, these are the things that you should be communicating to employees. Like if you're doing a return to work plan right now, you really have to consider that the options have changed a lot for your employees. Like they might have had a bus route that picked them up outside of their house and dropped them off outside of your office that no longer exists, and they have to find an alternative option. Also, since we're a TMA, we're not, and we are funded by transit agencies, but we're also funded by the city of Seattle, Port, et cetera. We're able to kind of look at the holistic picture and have really focused on, hey, we have roughly 20 miles of Seattle safe streets that have been quote unquote cut off to traffic that are now options for people to spend time in, for people to use as active commuting routes. They've really focused on improving our protected bike network. So while transit is still a huge part of the equation, we're really encouraging people to continue to prepare to return to transit, especially in the new year. We're also able to really focus on all the different options and the slices of the pie and how they're going to fit together within individual organizations, as well as just the greater Seattle area.
Great. Does anyone else have any other questions before we wrap up? If not, Nick and Coire, thank you so much for sharing that information. While I know you guys have probably looked at it a million times, it's always great to hear other people talk about their own data and to see really kind of how we ask questions. I know I was screen capturing a handful of things as you guys went through, and I'm like, oh, that's a great way to ask that question. So I think we really appreciate it from the Telework Council, and hopefully other folks, whether they were on today or get to listen later, this information is definitely helpful. And more to come from the Telework Council. We are putting together another webinar before the end of the year, hoping to look at some information about hoteling and trends in office spaces, and looking at how companies may return to work and kind of orient their workspaces to accommodate teleworkers and people in the office. So thank you again for everybody. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and we will see you guys soon.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks, Amanda. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Allie.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.